They raised a crystal flute and stole my future with one polished sentence. In that chandelier glare, my father-in-law crowned his niece after only 8 weeks, while 3 years of my work vanished under applause. I smiled for the cameras, then wrote one page that detonated everything they thought I would quietly accept. If you've ever swallowed humiliation to keep the peace, stay with me. Tonight the room goes silent for the right reasons. Gerald Whitman loved a stage. The boardroom at Whitman & Rayner Logistics doubled as his theater. Smoked glass table, winter-bright orchids, and a wall of city lights that made Harbor City look obedient. The caterers had lined up bottles that breathed authority. Laughter tracked Gerald's movements as he crossed to the head of the table, a king inspecting his choir. "Team," he said, voice warm as velvet rope and just as restrictive. "Tonight is about evolution." Crystal chimed. Someone whispered, "Here it comes." I sat 2 chairs down, hands folded, keeping my breath shallow so my blazer would not tighten. Across from me, the digital ticker blinked a modest increase in quarterly freight, the same increase my team had chased for months. I had numbers, case studies, and a near-perfect client retention rate. I had, I believed, the offer coming. "I am thrilled to announce our new regional director," Gerald continued, smile not quite reaching his eyes. "The brilliant, disruptive, forward-thinking Sloan Hart." Applause arrived on cue, eager and loud. The room swelled. I could not move. Disbelief pinned my shoulders to the chair as if the leather had become wet cement. 8 weeks. She had been here 8 weeks. With a glossy resume and sharper cheekbones, introduced as a consultant who would shadow and learn. My team had run night shifts and weekend scrambles for 3 years. I had met trains at dawn and soothed executives at midnight. Evolution, apparently, meant skipping the people who had built the bridge. Sloan stood, blonde bob, immaculate, a suit the color of expensive storms. She beamed at Gerald, then tilted her head my way with practiced grace. "I'm honored," she said, voice honeyed with rehearsed humility. "Nora Vale has already been such an incredible mentor. I can't wait to learn from her." Mentor. Learn. Words that tried to pet me into compliance. My mouth formed a polite smile I did not own, and I offered slow, measured claps that sounded like a hollow hallway. Gerald's gaze snagged mine for a heartbeat. Something flickered. Remorse or a warning. He looked away. We broke for miniature crab cakes and the kind of laughter that tastes like static. Colleagues approached with phrases in safe packaging. "You're the glue. You're the rock. You're invaluable." All the words that appear right before people are asked to train the person who will replace them. I slipped to the window. Harbor City burned with possibility. 1,000 apartments and offices, 1,000 stories of someone getting exactly what they deserved, and someone else learning to breathe around a bruise. My phone buzzed. "Evan, how'd it go? Is it official?" My husband's messages were always clean, never prying. I stared until the text blurred, then typed, "We'll talk tonight." Gerald materialized beside me. He smelled like cedar and confidence. "Walk with me, Nora." His office remained a shrine to his rise. Framed trade lane maps, a brass sextant that never navigated anything, photos of ribbon cuttings where he did most of the cutting. He gestured to the chair where, 3 months earlier, he had said the words I had stitched into my hope. "It's your time. Only a formality." "I know that was surprising," he began. "Surprising," I repeated, letting the syllables sit in my mouth until they cooled. "You are core to this company. Sloan will need your perspective, your continuity. Think of this as elevation for us all." "Elevation," I said softly. "Is that what you call it when a staircase disappears under your feet?" He smiled, patient, patriarchal. "You have a calm head. You won't make this personal. 3 years is personal." My voice stayed even, which surprised me. 3 years of building a department from a shaky dozen to a team that actually sleeps some nights. 3 years of quiet winds and loud fires. You said it was a formality." "Needs evolve," he replied, fiddling with his wedding band. "Sloan brings edge, youth, freshness. You," he paused, searching, "bring stability." There it was, stability, the praise that doubles as a leash. "Evan will understand," he added, invoking my husband, his son, as if loyalty could be triangulated. "Family looks out for family." I nodded as if soothed and stood. I should get home. He's making dinner. At the door, he softened. "You've always had my respect." Respect should not feel like a pat on the head. I walked the marble hallway, heels a metronome for the beat of something hardening inside me. In the elevator mirror, a woman stared back with excellent posture and eyes that were far too calm for someone on the edge of a cliff. She looked like me, and suddenly she did not. Outside, Harbor City's wind knifed my cheeks. I drove past the wharf where cranes gnawed at sky. I let the radio talk me through other people's tragedies. They sounded unbelievably solvable. The traffic lights pulsed their commands, green to yellow to red, the same colors as warning, as money, as heat leaving the body. I parked beneath the silver maple that guarded our building, fingers tight around the steering wheel until the bones in my hand complained. Then I went upstairs to tell the truth. Evan had set the table, candles and all. The smell of rosemary and garlic made the kitchen warm and undeserved. He took one look at my face and pulled out a chair. "Sit. Tell me." I told him everything. The flute, the smile, the speech, the word mentor like a velvet muzzle. His jaw shifted, then set. "He used you. He used what I offered," I said, which is almost worse. "I'm calling him." "No!" I reached for his wrist, the familiar pulse under my thumb. "This is my fight." He looked at me for a long moment. "Then we fight your way." I ate 3 bites because eating meant I was still a person. Then I showered, and the water turned my skin pink while my mind sorted through options I did not yet have the courage to name. When I slid into bed, Harbor City hummed through the window. I watched the dark ceiling until it felt like paper waiting for ink. It did not feel like the end of something. It felt like a fuse. The next morning, I chose war paint. Not rage, never rage. Precision. A midnight suit, a silk blouse the color of clean bone, and my grandmother's small oval locket. On the train, I practiced silence. It is a discipline. It is also a weapon. At 9 o'clock sharp, Sloan breezed in with a color-coded planner and the bright eagerness of a guest who assumes she already owns the house. "Morning, Nora. I'm thrilled to soak up your expertise." Soak up, as if I were a spill to be managed. "Let's start with North Shore Maritime," I said, sliding a binder across the desk. "They account for nearly a third of our terminal throughput. They prefer calls on Tuesday mornings, and they don't say urgent unless a vessel is physically off the schedule." Her pen hovered. "What if I offer them a digital dashboard? They have one," I said gently. "They want a human who remembers the names of their captains." We moved through accounts. I mapped personalities, tolerances, disaster procedures. She scribbled notes, then asked questions that revealed the gap between classroom and crush depth. "What if someone threatens to pull their volume?" she asked. "You listen. You do not promise what cannot be delivered. You give a realistic timeline with a cushion they will forgive you for using. But if they say they're moving to a competitor, you let them say it. Then you show them a path where they win more by staying." I watched the flicker in her eyes, the first insult of complexity. By noon, my patience had thinned to lace. I warmed leftover soup in the break room. The spoon clinked, unsteady in my hand. Through the wall, thin, old plaster, Gerald's voice drifted from his office, that booming baritone built for announcements. "The transition is smooth," he said. "Sloan is absorbing quickly." A pause. Sloan's voice, bright with a child's worry. "Are you sure Nora is okay with all this?" Dependable. The word snapped something delicate inside me. Not because it was untrue, but because of how it had been used, as a blade disguised as a ribbon. I thought about my team, a rough dozen when I arrived. Now a machine with 30+ people moving like muscles under skin. Apparently, stability is dull until it disappears. Sloane hesitated. Clients ask for her by name. That's the problem, Gerald replied, almost laughing. They're too used to Nora's comfort. We need to jolt them. Challenge their assumptions. Challenge their assumptions. I pressed my palm to the wall, and for a ridiculous second I imagined pushing through it. What about her feelings? Sloane asked softly. Business isn't about feelings, he said. Nora will adapt. She always does. She has nowhere else to go at her age. At her age. I set the spoon down, carefully, like it might explode. I am not ancient. I am not a relic. I am a woman whose experience has sharp corners. The idea that those corners made me safe to ignore would have been funny if it had not been an old bruise finding a new thumb. I carried my soup back to my desk and did not taste it. Instead, I printed things, lists, SOPs I had polished for years, a timeline of my wins, not for presentation, but for clarity. I annotated the process documents as if I were an archaeologist mapping an empire everyone else insisted was an empty field. At 4, I guided Sloane through a crisis simulation. A shipment stranded 2 states away, a terminal down 1 crane, an executive demanding a miracle. She suggested escalating through proper channels. I suggested calling the night foreman who owed me a favor because I had remembered his daughter's name when she was sick. Her pen slowed. Recognition, or respect, or disbelief, something human, finally, in her eyes. By 5, I had decided to stop bleeding slowly. On the train home, rust scribbled the edge of the river. The city slid past in gray sheets. I thought of Evan's face when I had said no, let me. He trusts my mind. He trusts it more when I trust it first. Back in our kitchen, I opened my laptop. The glow hit me like stage lights. I took a breath, then typed. Dear Mr. Whitman, please accept this letter as my formal notice of resignation from my position as Senior Operations Manager at Whitman & Rayner Logistics. My final working day will be 2 weeks from today. I am grateful for what I have learned here. I wish the company well. Sincerely, Nora Vale. Short, clean, cold water on a fever. I printed the letter on heavy paper we save for holidays. I signed my name in ink the color of old wine and slid it into an envelope that felt, shockingly, like relief. Evan found me pouring tea. He kissed my temple. How do we fight tonight? We write, I said. He read the letter without speaking. When he finished, he pressed his thumb to my signature as if to seal it twice. I'm proud of you. You're biased. Of course. He set the letter on the counter, aligned the edges. That doesn't make me wrong. We ate in a hush that did not hurt. Later, I tucked the envelope into my work bag and stood at the window. Harbor City purred. Somewhere, a siren argued with the wind. I touched the locket at my throat and thought of the women in my family who had survived on less than a plan and more than stubbornness. The city did not care who became regional director. That indifference felt like permission. I slept like someone who had ended a storm with a sentence. I arrived early. The office still smelled like last night's applause. I placed the envelope on my desk, centered like a compass. Then I did the work. I answered emails, fixed a stubborn formula for Jonah in accounting, and drafted a transfer memo that would make my exit clean. When the clock on my screen rolled to 10, I stood, took the envelope, and walked. Marie, Gerald's assistant, has held a dozen people's secrets and survived all of them. She looked up with her usual kindness. He's just finishing a call, honey. You can go in. I sat across from the antique desk, the one with clawed feet that always made me think of a creature at rest. Gerald finished telling someone that a delay was completely manageable, then turned, already impatient. "What can I do for you, Nora? I have back-to-backs until 3. I slid the envelope onto the blotter and folded my hands in my lap. He opened it with a silver blade, the gesture almost theatrical. He read. His face went from healthy to paper. "You're not serious." "I am." "This is absurd. We just promoted Sloane. She needs you. Your team needs you. The North Shore account alone—" "They will be fine," I said evenly. "Sloane is very enthusiastic." "Nora," he stood, then paced. "If this is about the promotion, we can revisit titles, responsibilities, money." "Stop." The word landed between us like something heavy and indisputable. He actually did stop. "This is about respect." "You are respected." "Stability is not respect," I said. "Invisible labor is not respect. Being talked about as predictable, as someone with no options. Do you know I heard that? Through your wall, thin plaster, thick lies." He flinched. "You misunderstood." "I understood," I said. "Exactly." Silence. A long one. He sat. For the first time since I'd known him, Gerald looked small. Not because power had left him, but because the shape of it had changed in the room. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "A corner office? An executive track?" "I want to work where merit is a passage, not a cul-de-sac." He opened his mouth, then closed it. I stood. At the door, I turned back. "You were right about one thing. I have been predictable. I showed up, I fixed it, I made you look wise. Consider this. A new pattern." Marie watched me emerge, concern creasing her forehead. "Everything all right?" "For me? Yes." I rested my hand on her desk. "Take your lunches away from your computer, Marie. Promise me." She blinked, then smiled. "I'll try." The hallway felt different on the return trip, as if the building had shifted half an inch on its foundation. By noon, everyone knew offices like ours are ecosystems of whispers. Some people stopped by with soft eyes and careful words. Others avoided me altogether, as if resignation were catching. Sloane hovered at my door and did not come in. I spent the afternoon doing what I do best, building safety nets. I cataloged open projects, flagged landmines, and sent a handoff plan that could have onboarded a stranger in 2 days. My team deserved more than chaos. They deserved to survive the decision I had made to finally prioritize my own oxygen. At 4, my phone lit with an unfamiliar number. I let it go, then picked up on the second ring because instinct told me this one mattered. "This is Nora." "Ms. Vale," a crisp voice said. "Rebecca Chen from Meridian Freight Systems. I hope I'm not intruding." Meridian, the rival Gerald never named aloud. "Not at all. I had coffee with Daniel Northshore yesterday. From North Shore Maritime," I said, heart doing a precise small thing inside my chest. "He described your stewardship in terms we do not hear often. We're expanding our regional operations. I would love to learn what you might be looking for next." I breathed once, slow. "I'm listening. Could you speak tomorrow?" I glanced at my calendar, then remembered it no longer held me hostage. "I can." When I hung up, my hands trembled, not with fear, with the dangerous high of possibility. I looked around my office for 13 more days, and felt something I had not felt in months. Appetite. At 5, I shut down my computer and stared at the dark screen long enough to see my reflection resolve. A woman with a still face and eyes that did not look tired anymore. On the train, the city unfurled. The river gleamed like a road for those who can find it. At home, Evan opened the door before I could fish out my keys. "How did it go?" "I left the letter, and," He tried to buy me back with nouns, I said. Title, office, package. I said no. Evan's smile was quiet and complete. Okay, he said, as if we had just agreed to show up for a sunrise. We ate on the couch, knees touching. After, I sent my resume to Rebecca Chen with a brief note that sounded like a person who knows what she is worth without begging anyone else to validate it. Then I closed the laptop and let the evening sit close. We watched a storm roll across the harbor, a sheet of rain marching like a gray army. The lightning stitched the sky shut, then opened it again. I fell asleep with a taste of metal and triumph under my tongue. The next morning would bring emails, calls, and the particular ache of saying goodbye well. It would also bring an answer from Meridian that might change everything. For the first time since the toast, anticipation burned cleaner than anger. Humiliation had done something I did not expect. It had clarified me. At dawn, I touched the locket and whispered thanks to every version of myself that had stayed late, learned the hard way, and kept receipts. I walked to the train. The platform smelled like rain and brakes and newness. My phone buzzed as the cars slid in. Subject, conversation, and an offer. I did not open it, not yet. I held the moment the way you hold a breath under a surface you are about to break, and then I stepped on. Meridian's lobby felt like air that had learned to fly. Light moved through glass like it had a schedule to keep. No chandeliers, no velvet performances. Just clean lines and plants that looked genuinely alive. Rebecca Chen met me with a handshake that said we remove friction for sport. Nora, she said, thank you for coming on short notice. Thank you for asking. She guided me past a wall of shipping maps rendered like modern art. We run hot, she said. Clear goals, fewer layers, radical candor. If something breaks, we fix it, not the narrative. I smiled. That sounds illegal in some offices, she laughed. Come meet the people who will challenge you and have your back. The room she led me into was not a boardroom, it was a workshop. Screens, whiteboards, coffee that did not taste like regret. I met the team leads I would, in another version of my life, have mentored for someone else's title. Here, nobody looked past me to see whose Mies I might be. We spoke about throughput, demurrage, chassis shortages, and the language of apology that actually keeps customers. I walked through a case where a vessel missed its window, and we rescued the schedule with grit and a favor from a night foreman who sings at dawn. They took notes like the details mattered, because they do. Finally, Rebecca asked the question interviews always limp toward. Why did you leave Whitman and Rayner? I could have dressed it in corporate cotton. I didn't. I reached a ceiling that had nothing to do with performance. Loyalty without respect becomes servitude. I refused to raise a second ceiling above my own head. Rebecca nodded slowly, the way people do when they recognize a scar they carry too. We believe in two things here, earned advancement and visible credit. Can you work with that? It is what I have been working toward my whole career. They sent me home with a timeline and a promise. They would move quickly. On the train, Harbor City blurred into a watercolor of possibility. Evan waited with soup and blankets. I told him everything. He listened, eyes bright with the kind of quiet joy that makes marriages last. Before sleep, an email. Subject, offer for regional operations director. I read it twice. A base above anything Whitman and Rayner had ever hinted at. Equity that felt like partnership rather than a pat on the head. A development budget I could use without begging. Benefits that acknowledged a human life outside a desk. In plain words, respect with receipts. I accepted the next morning in a sentence that did not apologize for existing. Then I walked into Whitman and Rayner with a peace I had not recognized on my own face before. I continued to build the safety net for my team. I answered every question Sloan asked. I said nothing sharp. Mercy is not weakness. It is proof you never needed their stage to be a person. On my last Friday, I left the department a binder that could have steered a ship through fog. I wrote personalized notes to the people who had lifted the place with their hands. Doc schedulers, analysts, the receptionist who remembered birthdays better than software. I packed a box with plants and the small brass paperweight Evan found at a market the year we married. Marie hugged me in the hallway. "Right when you win," she whispered. "I will," I promised. I intended to keep that promise in public. Walking out, I did not look back. The glass doors hissed shut. It sounded like a chapter binding itself. On Monday, Meridian felt like a sunrise I got to keep. My badge worked. The elevator did not resent me. The welcome email included 3 lines that should be boring and are not. "We are glad you are here. You'll be listened to. Your time matters." At 9, I sat with the executive team. Marcus Duval, the CEO, had the alert posture of a former athlete and the conversation style of someone who has no time for theater. "This role is pivotal," he said. "We kept it open until we found someone who has both the receipts and the restraint. Everything I've heard says that is you. Prove us right and we'll make more room." "Copy," I said. The word landed like a handshake. By noon, I had a list. Stabilize 3 accounts flirting with the exit, create a crisis triage protocol that human beings can follow in the dark, and stop the leak between promise and process. My office was smaller than my old one, and, forgive me, far more alive. I taped a single sentence above the screen: "Do not ask permission to fix what you can reach." 2 days later, the fire started. North Shore Maritime called with that particular tone only emergencies have. A vessel was rerouted by weather, the cargo would hit the wrong terminal, and someone had already sent an email containing the words, "Please be advised." You can feel a client's blood pressure through a phone line. "Hi, Daniel," I said. "I read the update. Give me 60 minutes to come back with 2 options and 1 apology that fits." He exhaled, a sound like he had been holding a building. "Nora, if anyone can thread this, it's you." I did not thread it alone. I grabbed ops, pulled in the night foreman, and called a port contact who owed me a favor because I once saved his nephew from a paperwork disaster. We moved boxes on a map and trucks on a road. In 51 minutes, we had a plan. In 58, I had Daniel on the phone. In 60, we had his yes. He did not thank me dramatically. He thanked me like you thank a surgeon for removing a shard. Quiet. Grateful. Aware. At day's end, Marcus stopped by my door. "I hear you turned a storm into a schedule." "I had good people," I said. "You had leadership," he corrected. "Keep doing that." A week into Meridian, I realized something almost embarrassing. I had been training for this exact pace my entire life. When respect meets competence, work stops feeling like a test and starts feeling like a craft. I left at a reasonable hour with energy left to be a person. Evan and I cooked late dinners and celebrated small wins like they were medals. I slept on both sides of midnight without waking to phantom alarms. My jaw unclenched, my voice lowered, my laughter returned to its natural settings. At the 2-week mark, Rebecca brought me into a strategy session where the agenda was not a trap. "We have a pipeline of potential transfers from Whitman and Rayner," she said carefully. "They reached out to us. I want to proceed ethically." "We respond, not recruit," I said. "We don't harvest pain, but we receive talent that's been starved." She nodded. "That's exactly the line." When the meeting ended, I stood alone in the hallway and let a truth settle. Dignity scales. When you build it into a system, it multiplies. When you remove it, everything collapses faster than pride can pretend otherwise. Harbor City spread itself under my office window, all steel and water and stubborn light. Somewhere across that grid, Gerald was likely calling a meeting to insist nothing had changed. He would be wrong. Everything had. The invitation arrived with the ice of inevitability. Port Alliance Luncheon. Keynote on reliability in disrupted markets. The regional press would be there, as well as the usual parade of executives who believe microphones exist to prove they do. Meridian asked me to deliver the keynote. I said yes without flinching. When people have tried to make you invisible long enough, standing up is not a risk. It is the cure. We booked a modest ballroom with good sightlines. No faux grandeur, no overpromised chandeliers. I wore a slate suit that photographed well and a simple chain that caught the light like a nod. I walked on stage to a ripple of polite interest. It swelled when I introduced myself. "I'm Nora Vale, Regional Operations Director at Meridian Freight Systems. The opening story was not dramatic, just precise. A storm reroutes a vessel. A client panics. An organization either dissolves into emails or assembles into answers. I broke the variables down into human moves. I did not preach innovation. I preached something scarcer. Accountable, calm. Reliability is not a synonym for boring, I said. It is the baseline that allows daring. It is the quiet confidence that lets your clients take bolder bets. You want to be the reason they sleep. People laughed, softly. The good kind. Midway through, I spotted them at a back table. Gerald, shoulders stiff, and Sloane, posture performing. My pulse did not jump. It steadied. Humiliation had introduced us to one another. Success would finish the conversation. I closed with a challenge. If you handle freight, you already handle fear. Teach your teams the difference between dramatic and urgent. Kill the theater. Keep the promise. The applause felt earned, not orchestrated. Reporters circled. Questions came. How to manage chassis scarcity without burning people out. What to automate and what to touch by hand. How to retain clients when everyone's patience is a flickering match. I answered with stories and systems. I did not mention Whitman and Rayner. I did not need to. On my way off stage, Gerald intercepted me. "Nora," he said, smile fixed in place. "Impressive talk." "Thank you," I replied. My voice stayed level. I would not give him the courtesy of spite. "We should catch up," he tried. "There may be a path back if—" "Gerald," I said, "I'm exactly where I want to be." He blinked, unused to the door closing without a bang. Sloane stood a step behind him, eyes hard and hungry. "Your slides," she said, tone sweet. "Will those be public?" "They will," I said. "Use them well." She nodded like a queen receiving tribute. I walked away before the old gravity could invent new weight. That afternoon, my inbox sprouted invitations. Panels, roundtables, a podcast with a loyal audience of people who actually move the world. Marcus stopped by near 5. "Congrats on the keynote," he said, "and the collateral effect." "What effect?" 3 prospective clients asked for follow-ups before your cab reached the curb. 2 of them named what you said about killing theater. I exhaled. "Then we owe the florist for the cheap centerpieces," he laughed. "We owe you for clarity." Evening in our kitchen tasted like lemon and olive oil. Evan lifted a glass. 2 reliable women being the most dangerous people in the room. Dangerous how? Because people stop seeing you coming. We touched glasses. I wished, briefly, that the younger version of me could have heard that toast before she tried to outwork doubt. But the younger version of me had also built the muscles the current version uses like wings. You do not get to skip the slow forging. You only get to use it when it matters. 3 days later, the consequences started ringing. "Ms. Vale?" The voice on the phone carried an accent I could not place and the alertness of someone who never forgets a deadline. "This is Amaya Patel with Harbor Collective. We were at your talk. We are evaluating our contract with Whitman and Rayner. We'd like a conversation." "We will not poach," I said automatically, "but we will respond. That's all I ask." I looped in Rebecca, set a meeting, and built a deck, not of magic but of steps. How we would stop the slow leaks that turn into floods. During the call, Amaya's questions were sharp and merciless. I welcomed them like a clear sky. At the end, she said, "I have not heard someone say, 'I don't know,' with that much steadiness in years. It made me trust you." "Thank you," I said. I try to give that answer only when it is true, and immediately followed by, "Here is when I will know." "We'll be in touch," she said. I could hear the decision landing in her office like a clean file on a clear desk. That evening, a message from Lila, accounting at Whitman and Rayner, the one who baked scones on days when forecasts were cruel. "Can I call?" "Of course." Her voice shook. "We lost North Shore," she said. "Official today. They say service quality declined. People are whispering that it's your fault, that you..." took them?" "I didn't take anyone," I said, "but I understand why they left." "Layoffs are rumored," she whispered. "I'm 59. If they push us out—" "Lila," I said, choosing my words like a bridge chooses beams. "Would you be open to a conversation with Meridian's finance lead? We are growing. We need grown-ups." Silence, then a sob that startled us both. "Yes, we will do this right," I said. "Send me your resume, tonight." After the call, I sat with the ache of unintended consequences. I wanted Gerald to feel the results of his choices. I did not want good people to pay the invoice. In the living room, Evan muted the game. "You're somewhere rough," he said. "I'm somewhere honest," I answered. "Which is rough." He tucked me under his arm and let me breathe. We watched Harbor City's night coil and glow. I reminded myself of the rule I taped above my screen. Fix what you can reach. I reached for Lila. I reached for teams that would be better fed at Meridian. I did not reach for revenge. It was already on its way without my help. The invitation surprised me less than it should have. Whitman and Rayner Annual Recognition Dinner. White card, silver script, the same ballroom that smells like money and lilacs. Evan read it over my shoulder. "No." "Maybe," I said. "Nora, I'm not going for them," I said. "I'm going for the woman who stayed too long and the women watching from back tables." He closed his eyes, then nodded. "Then wear the dress that makes you forget questions." Emerald silk, simple lines, shoes I could run in if the night turned feral. Rebecca insisted on coming as my guest. She called it moral support and market research. We arrived to a room doing its best impression of excellence. The lighting was expensive, but the energy felt thinner, like someone had stretched the evening past its structural integrity. People approached. The brave smiled with genuine warmth. The cautious delivered careful compliments like packages they were afraid I might open. Tom from Analytics gripped my hand. "It is not the same," he said simply. I squeezed back. "I know." The lights dimmed. Gerald walked on stage looking 10 years older and still desperately strong. He spoke about resilience and evolution as if words could repair outcomes. When he said recognize talent wherever found, his eyes flicked toward me. I did not blink. The program trudged through winds that sounded like consolation. Then came the flourish. "A new award," Gerald announced, "for leadership that leaves a lasting mark." He smiled in my direction. "Please welcome." For a heartbeat, the room held its breath. "Our honoree, Ms. Nora Vale." Applause cracked open the air. I stood because I refused to be dragged to a stage by anyone's narrative. Walking forward, I felt every version of me shoulder to shoulder. The one who stayed late without credit, the one who heard insults through thin walls, the one who printed a letter on heavy paper and stepped into weather. I took the glass trophy that looked suspiciously like a mirror. Gerald leaned close. "Thank you for coming," he murmured. "Thank you for the lesson," I said, and meant it. I faced the room. The microphone smelled like dust and effort. "I'm grateful," I began, "for what I learned within these walls. About operations, yes, but more about worth." The word worth made something rustle among the tables. "I learned that loyalty is a two-way contract," I continued. "That stability is a superpower, not a sedative. That when you mistake quiet competence for lack of ambition, you are about to lose your ballast." A murmur. Then that nervous laughter that sounds like glass settling. "I work at Meridian now, where merit is a staircase, not a ceiling. We are not perfect. We are honest about where we aren't. If you are in a room where your value is visible only when it benefits someone else's speech, consider the exits. They are there for a reason." Silence. Then scattered applause that grew because courage is contagious. I handed the microphone back. Gerald's smile remained, but it had become an organ for survival, not celebration. Back at my table, Rebecca squeezed my hand. That was a masterclass in elegant disruption. "I said the truth and left room around it," I murmured. We made for the door after dessert, not waiting for whatever spin the after-party would apply. In the corridor, Gerald caught up. He looked deflated. "Nora," he said, "we are restructuring. If you ever, Gerald, I said gently, because the victory was already complete. You built a house where certain people could never own a door. I found another address. I wish you better architecture. He stared, then nodded once, the kind of nod men reserve for weather they cannot command. Outside, Harbor City air hit my lungs like a baptism. Rebecca looped her arm through mine.
How does it feel to redirect a spotlight without burning?
Like finally letting my skin be my own, I said. Back home, Evan waited with tea and that look that says, I will never mistake your strength for comfort again. We placed the glass award on a shelf beside a photograph from my first day at Meridian. 2 objects, 1 message. You get to choose which story becomes permanent. Sleep took me quickly. Morning brought a calendar full of work that matters and a message from Lila. Interview set. Thank you. I stood at the window and watched cranes chew daylight into shape. Public humiliation had been the opening scene. Public clarity was the sequel. Before I left for the office, I recorded a short note for the listeners who find me because stories travel faster than freight. If someone handed your future to a stranger and called it evolution, breathe. Keep your receipts. Build the letter you might need. Respect is not a gift. It is an environment. Go where you can breathe. Then I stepped into a day built by my own hands. Evan's mother set the table like a ceasefire, linen, candles, the good plates that only come out when peace is negotiable. The Whitman townhouse smelled like herbs and old victories. I had not been in that dining room since the toast that bent the room. Tonight, we were here for family time, which is what people call it when they want your mouth full while they reframe history. Gerald arrived late, sleeves rolled, a performance of humility. Nora, he said, tone gentle, you look well. I am, I replied. We ate salad. Small talk skittered across the surface. Weather, the city's new ferry, Evan's latest project. Then the flip. We should discuss opportunities to collaborate, Gerald said, reaching for the roast. There is no reason we cannot support one another. Define support, I said. Consulting, bridge projects. You know our systems. We could—
Gerald, Evan interrupted, voice calm steel. This is dinner. Gerald's jaw flexed. This is life. I set my fork down. If you want to talk business, here is my position. I will not be your back door to my company. If Whitman and Rayner needs help, you can come through Meridian's front door like everyone else. We will evaluate the work, the ethics, and the impact on people you have kept in limbo. His eyes flashed. You would let strangers decide the fate of your family? I would let merit decide, I said. That is what I've always wanted for us, for all of us. Silence tightened, then snapped with the ring of my phone. Rebecca. I excused myself to the hallway. Emergency, she said. Harbor Collective's shipment is trapped behind a labor action at East Dock. If we do not navigate this right, they will miss a critical window and take their volume elsewhere. I'm on my way, I said, already moving. Evan met my eyes across the room. He was up before I was. Go, he said. I will run interference. Back at Meridian, the war room was awake. Maps, calls, a low hum of focused urgency. I pulled up the dispatch feed, looped in the labor liaison, and got Amaya on video. Her face was composed, but the numbers scrolling beside her were not. We respect the workers, I said, and we protect your timeline. Those can coexist. We will route through Northgate, where the solidarity action is a slow roll, not a hard stop. It is longer, but it keeps the chain intact. That will hit cost, she warned. Less than the cost of missing your contract clause, I replied. We will absorb the difference for choosing the ethical path. Rebecca glanced at me, then nodded. Approved. We coordinated escorts, moved trucks like chess, and kept a clear line with the stewards on site. I did not bully, I did not cajole. I acknowledged the right to draw a line while drawing one of our own. 4 hours later, cargo moved. Amaya exhaled.
No one offered us a plan that did not require someone to lose face, she said. Thank you. Thank the people who showed up in the rain to keep the port safe, I answered. We just refused to make them the villain. When I reached home, Evan was waiting on the couch, sleeves rolled like a mirror of his father that somehow did not sting. How bad? He asked. We threaded it, I said, dropping my bag. No lightning, just work. He pulled me into his side. Dinner did not implode. Your mother-in-law asked for the recipe to your patience. Your father-in-law asked for a second chance at a partnership. What did you say? I said we do not make deals at tables set with family portraits. I laughed into his shoulder, an exhausted, grateful sound. Somewhere across the city, Gerald stared at a glass of good whiskey and calculated. He still thought the world could be convinced. I had learned the world had to be convinced and served. Before sleep, I drafted a debrief to the team. What worked? What could be faster? Which relationships we needed to strengthen? I closed with one sentence. We tell the truth even when it costs. We choose the path where people keep their dignity. I hit send. The room felt warm again. In the morning, a text from an unknown number. You do not know me. I am a supervisor at East Dock. I heard how you handled last night. Respect. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Respect is quiet when it is real. It arrives like a nod and keeps moving. I tucked the phone away and walked into a day that would require all of it. The podcast invitation came from a show I had actually listened to on rough commutes. The load-in, the load-out. Truckers, port hands, schedulers, and ops leads tune in. No fluff, just people solving friction. I said yes because I owed my story to the ones who work when the microphones go home. We recorded in a studio that smelled like coffee and roadmaps. The host, Maya, had the voice of a friend who would tell you when your axle was about to fail. Tell me about the night you decided to print the letter, she said. I told her about thin walls and thick lies, about hearing myself described as predictable, about how predictability is a virtue until people weaponize it. Maya did not gasp. She nodded like a person who has been called dependable in a tone that meant disposable. What would you tell the dispatcher who is being asked to train her replacement? She asked. Write down your brilliance, I said. Keep receipts on yourself. If the room refuses to say your name with respect, make sure the record does. Then, this is the hard part, believe that another room exists. We got practical. Crisis triage, apology language that lowers heat instead of spraying gasoline. How to build a career on the ethics of accurate promises. The episode dropped on a Thursday. By Friday afternoon, my inbox was a stack of testimonies and asks. One message stood out. Subject, audit request. The sender was a compliance officer at a major retailer known for squeezing margins until they scream. We heard your podcast. We want an external audit of our logistics partners' crisis protocols. We will pay for your time. I forwarded it to Marcus. He walked into my doorway 90 seconds later. Do you want this? If we can do it without throwing anyone under a bus they cannot see coming. We can, he said. We will make the findings anonymous and the fixes specific. We built an audit structure over the weekend. By Tuesday, we were inside 3 partner networks mapping how problems escalated from manageable to fiasco. The patterns were not mysterious. The patterns were human. People were punished for raising red flags, so they learned to hide them. Leaders prized charisma over follow-through, so fires burned while speeches were delivered. We wrote recommendations that were both kind and non-negotiable. Train the apology into the muscle memory of your front line. Put someone with real authority on night shift. Replace the vanity metrics with a dashboard that tells the ugly truth fast. This was not glamorous work. It was architecture. It was also the most radical thing I had done. Redesign rooms so that people like me do not have to prove their worth twice before breakfast. Word traveled. More audits. More rooms remade. Meridian became the place where drama goes to die and results go to multiply. That is not a tagline you put on a billboard. It is a sentence your clients say when they are tired of bleeding. Then came the article. A trade journal ran a profile titled "The Woman Who Killed Theater at the Port." The photos were kind. The quotes were honest. The piece mentioned Whitman and Rayner once, her former employer, and moved on. It was an essay about the beauty of boring in an industry addicted to firefighting. I skimmed it at my desk, cheeks hot in a way that did not hurt. By noon, my feed was an argument. She is glorifying the grind. No, she is explaining how to stop mistaking chaos for importance. This is gendered. If a man said this, you would call him visionary. If a man said this, you would call him common sense and give him stock. I closed the tab. The work was the work. I had a team meeting in 11 minutes about a software switch that would save hours every week if we got the rollout right, and cost weeks if we did not. That evening, Evan and I took a walk by the harbor. The wind bullied my hair, and the gulls argued like they paid rent. He slipped his hand into mine. "You are becoming visible," he said. "How does it feel?" "Like standing under a bright light with a fire extinguisher," I said. "Useful, a little ridiculous. Warm." We watched a container ship move like a slow wardrobe across the water. "Do you think he reads the articles?" Evan asked. "Gerald reads everything he thinks might be about him," I said gently. "This one is not." He nodded. "Good." When we turned back toward home, my phone buzzed. A message from someone I had not expected to hear from. "Sloan, can we talk off the record, please?" I stopped walking. The gulls kept arguing. "What do you think?" Evan asked. "I think quiet competence is about to get very loud," I said, and opened the message. Sloan wanted to meet in a public place. I chose a cafe with wide windows and a barista who remembered names without snobbery. She arrived looking tired behind the gloss. "Thank you," she said, words landing like someone crossing a river on flat stones. "Why me?" I asked. "Because you will not post the conversation for sport, and you will not let me lie to myself." "What do you need to say?" She exhaled. "I am drowning. They made me a symbol of modernity. I am a person who does not know how to stop 10 trucks from idling where they should not be. I am breaking in a way that will hurt other people." I watched her face. Ambition had not left. It had cracked its shell. "What do you want?" "Help," she said, "and not for me alone. We are going to cut people because we lost accounts you kept alive by force of competence. I do not want to sign those letters with a smile." I stirred my coffee, then set the spoon down with care. "I will not fix your house. I will tell you where the beams are rotting, and I will hand you the number of a carpenter you trust with your life." "Will you talk to Gerald?" she asked, voice small for the first time. "If he asks with respect," I said, "not because he thinks I am a lever he can pull." She nodded, eyes bright with tiredness and something like relief. She finished her cup, then stood. "You are not what they said you were," she said. "I know," I answered. "You do too." She left the cafe a little less glossy, a little more real. I texted Rebecca on the walk home. If Whitman and Rayner asks for a formal review with terms that protect workers, we listen. If not, we wish them a better map. She wrote back one word. Agreed. That night, sleep took a while. Not because of fear, because my mind was building staircases in houses that were not mine. It is a habit I am learning to break. It is also a skill I refuse to regret. The email came at dawn with the gray light. Subject, request for meeting, urgent and respectful. It was from Gerald. The phrasing was new. The humility, if borrowed, was at least returned on time. I forwarded it to Marcus and Rebecca, then added one line. "We meet if we control the terms." We sent back an invitation for the next morning at Meridian. No back rooms, no family dinners. A conference space with glass walls and good coffee. Evan kissed my cheek before I left for work. "You are not their daughter-in-law in that room," he said. You are their only honest broker. Gerald arrived with 2 executives and a legal pad. He looked smaller inside our building, not because our ceilings were higher, but because our air did not carry his history. He shook hands around the table. When he reached me, he paused. Thank you, he said simply. We are here to listen, I replied, and to set boundaries. Marcus opened. This is not a rescue, he said. It can be a partnership. If we agree the people at the bottom will not pay for the headlines at the top. Gerald's mouth tightened, then softened. Understood. Rebecca slid an agenda forward. We are proposing 3 tracks: a limited-term stabilization team, a joint ethics framework for crisis handling, and a transparent pathway for any Whitman and Rayner employee who wants to apply here without penalty. The final item landed like a stone in still water. Gerald swallowed. You would hire them out from under me. We would provide a door that should have existed already, I said. If you build better rooms, fewer people will walk through. He nodded. A long, slow movement that looked more like acceptance than defeat. Our house is not sound, he said. We made choices. I made choices. I am asking for a way to keep it standing long enough to rebuild. Then you will accept the part where optics do not control outcomes, I said. No speeches while fires burn, no promotions bought with last names, public credit for the teams who fix your messes, private apologies where they are due. He looked at me over the legal pad. You have changed. I have stopped pretending I had not, I said. The meeting turned practical. Systems, timelines, guardrails, money. We did not discuss family. We did not disguise power. When it ended, Gerald stayed behind a beat, the way people do when there is a second conversation they are afraid to begin. Nora, he said, I have lost your forgiveness. You never had it as a currency, I said. What you have is an opportunity to behave better from this minute forward. That is all forgiveness ever requires. His eyes shone for a second he could not hide. He nodded once, then left with his team. Rebecca leaned in the doorway once they were gone. You just changed an industry meeting into a small revolution. We changed the terms, I said. Revolutions come later and with worse coffee. The stabilization team spun up within days. We embedded 2 managers at Whitman and Rayner with the authority to rewrite playbooks and the humility to ask questions first. I went over twice a week to chair joint stand-ups. The first morning, the old lobby smelled like lilies and bravado. The second week, it smelled like cleaning products and realism. Progress. Sloane showed up for the daily at 7:45. Hair in a ponytail, a legal pad ruined with notes. She listened. She made lists. She stopped posing questions like tests and started asking them like a person who knows she is not the smartest in the room yet. That is not a fall from grace. That is grace finding its purpose. We triaged accounts. We built escalation maps that made sense to the people holding the phones in the dark. We established a rule that would have sounded radical in that building 6 months earlier. If you catch something early, you are celebrated. If you hide something late, you are coached. If you spin, you are gone. Word of the partnership leaked, of course. The press called it a rescue, then a capitulation, then a savvy play. I ignored the noise and kept walking the halls where whispers used to pinch my lungs. Lila started her new job at Meridian with a salary that made her cry in my office. Tom from Analytics sent me a message at 2 a.m. I slept. First time in months. At home, Evan and I celebrated the boring miracles. A Tuesday with no emergencies after 9. A Saturday morning with pancakes. A voicemail from his mother, shy with gratitude for the way we had drawn lines that protected even her husband from himself. One evening, Gerald asked to meet me on neutral ground. We chose the small park by the water where crabgrass pretends to be wild. He arrived in a navy windbreaker like an ordinary man who thinks about warmth before optics. I was wrong, he said without preface. Not just about the promotion, about the equation. I thought legacy meant building a pedestal. It means building a floor people can stand on. I watched the water tip and return. You could have learned it the easy way, I said. You chose the hard way. I am learning, he replied. The price is fair.
We stood in a companionable silence that would have been impossible a year ago. Then he cleared his throat. "Evan is proud of you." "I know," I said, smiling. He tells me, in sentences that feel like shelter. Gerald nodded, eyes on the river.
"I am proud too," he said quietly. It was not a demand for a response. It was a small brick placed on the right part of the foundation. I left it there. By the end of the month, the stabilization metrics were clean. Not perfect, honest. The joint team had cut response times by nearly half. Client churn slowed. A layoff memo that had been drafted was torn up in a meeting where no one performed. Meridian closed a new contract on the strength of our audit work and our refusal to treat people like spare parts. The award from that other ballroom gathered dust by choice. We do not polish mirrors here. We polish systems. One night, after dinner, I opened my laptop to prepare the script for something I had promised listeners after the first episode. A follow-up to the story, with the receipts. I typed a line I wished someone had handed me when I was young and excellent and overlooked. If you are the person who keeps the lights on while someone else adjusts the spotlight, do not dim yourself to fit their stage. Build your own theater. Invite the ones who have learned to work in the dark. The show will be better. The audience will stay. You will sleep. I saved the document and turned off the screen. The room was still. Evan touched my shoulder and I leaned back into his hand the way tired people lean into relief. The city hummed. Somewhere, a crane swung. Progress is not loud. It is persistent. Tomorrow, we would decide whether the stabilization team should transition to a longer contract or step away. Either answer would be right if it kept the rules intact. Dignity first, then speed. Honesty first, then headlines. I slept before I could rehearse the entire conversation. That, more than any profile or plaque, felt like the sharpest measure of success. The stabilization contract had been live for just under 1 month when the numbers stopped whispering and began to sing. Response times were cut by nearly half. Escalations dropped by almost a third. Client churn, once a slow bleed, flattened into a line that looked like a held breath. We compiled the joint report with ruthless clarity. No fireworks, only receipts. The opening page carried 2 short sentences. Here is what was broken. Here is what was rebuilt without theater. We included the names of the people who did the rebuilding: dispatchers, schedulers, night supervisors, printed in a font large enough for a board to recognize. Whitman and Rayner scheduled the review for a Wednesday morning, the kind of midweek ritual that used to mean speeches. We packed the smallest necessary team: me, Rebecca, and a manager who had slept on a folding cot once because the port cameras failed and he refused to leave the operators blind. Marcus did not attend on purpose. "This is your room," he said. "You built the door. You can hold it open." We took seats in a boardroom lined with oil paintings that stared like ancestors choosing favorites. Gerald was already there, tie loosened, eyes steady. Sloane arrived with her legal pad scarred by use. The rest of the board settled in with an air that said, "Convince us with your tone." I was not there to perform. I opened by thanking the teams and speaking 3 names I knew the board had never learned. Then I placed the report where it could not be ignored. "The data is not beautiful," I said. "It is honest." I walked them through the charts the way you talk a frightened horse across a bridge. Firm, patient, refusing panic. Midway through, a director famous for elegant dismissals leaned back. "So your thesis is that reliability drives retention." "My thesis," I said, calm as a held door, "is that people who can admit a problem before lunch can save a company by dinner." We taught them to surface smoke while the room still had oxygen. Sloane added her portion without pretense. "I was promoted before I knew how to keep the cranes moving," she said, voice level. "We built a weekly drill that turned me into what the role requires. I am learning, publicly." The board shifted. The portraits seemed to lean closer. I moved to the last slide, a future state without slogans. Keep the triage program. Keep the ethics framework. Keep the application door open for anyone who wants to come to Meridian. If you do this, you will not need us in 6 months. Silence followed.
the kind that tests a spine. Then Gerald cleared his throat. "I will recommend renewal," he said. "And," he hesitated, then let the word find air, "I will step back from day-to-day operations. We need a leader whose currency is not lineage." A murmur, genuine this time. He turned to the table. "I propose Dana Ortiz as interim chief of operations." My breath caught. Dana had started on night shift 15 years earlier and never once used volume to replace competence. She knew the doc names and the office lies and when to let a junior speak first. The vote was not unanimous, but it was real. When the hands were counted, Dana stood. She looked at me across the table and nodded once, an acknowledgement without debt. We all signed the addendum to the contract, then stood to go. On my way out, one of the older directors stopped me. "You did not gloat," he said, surprised. "There is nothing to gloat about," I replied. "We are late to obvious things." Outside, the air tasted like metal and morning. Rebecca exhaled a laugh that sounded like relief finally letting itself be heard. "How do you keep your face so still?" she asked, "when they are just now discovering gravity?" "Practice," I said, "and the promise of pancakes." At Meridian, I wrote the internal debrief, the wins, the cautions, the next drills. I added a note for Dana and her new team. "Keep the door propped for the quiet ones. That is where the future stands waiting, not waving." That evening, Evan and I ate at a diner where the cook knows how not to apologize for perfect eggs. He read the report on his phone while demolishing toast. "Gerald's stepping back," he said softly. "That is not the world I was raised in." "It is the world he is learning to live in," I said. "There's a difference." We walked home under a sky scratched by airplane paths. The city hummed, pleased with itself for reasons that had nothing to do with us. I slept like a person who had passed a test she did not study for and had been studying for all her life. News travels like wind on the waterfront. By the weekend, my inbox was a small parade of invitations. Panels, advisory councils. A glossy publication wanted to photograph me in a dress I would never wear to talk about a job I did not perform in dresses. I said yes to the rooms where the work would multiply and no to everything that would turn the work into garnish. On Monday morning, Gerald requested a brief private meeting. We chose Meridian's glass conference pod. He arrived looking like a man who had started listening to the clocks. "We are grateful," he began. "Take grateful to your payroll," I said gently. He nodded, absorbing the correction. Then he placed a slim folder on the table. "I want to ask you to return," he said, "as our chief operating officer." The air in the pod went very still. He continued before I could answer, with real authority, with a mandate to keep what you built here and translate it there. "I am not asking you to fix my career, I am asking you to save jobs." I let the offer sit between us like an object that might be holy or might be a trick. I thought of the thin walls, the thick lies, the long months of eroded dignity. I thought of Meridian, our muscle memory of honesty, the way laughter visits meetings that are not traps. I thought of Dana in a new chair and Sloan finally drafting questions that made sense. "I am honored," I said. "I am not available." He closed his eyes just once. "I expected as much." "I will remain your partner," I added, "on terms that protect the people who never had a lobby portrait. But I will not re-enter a house that taught me to tiptoe." He looked down at his hands, then back at me. "I did not ask thinking you would accept. I asked so that when I do better, it is not because you came back and made it easy. It is because I learned to do the part only I can do." "Then do it," I said. "Start with the easy mercies and the hard truths. Promote the ones who have been doing 2 jobs for the price of 1. Stop punishing early warnings. Publish your metrics like they are a mirror you actually want to face." He stood, then hesitated. "You know," he said, almost smiling, "you are very difficult to impress." "That is because I am very easy to respect," I replied. After he left, Rebecca slipped into the pod with a grin that knew too much. You turned down a title that would make people gasp. They already gasp, I said. The wrong people. She sat thoughtful. We should formalize the consulting arm, she said. Keep it small, high integrity, no drama. You set the bar, we protect the bar. Agreed, I said. First rule, we do not sell miracles, we sell maps. In the afternoon, Sloane requested time. She entered my office looking like a person who had stopped rehearsing. I owe you a sentence, she said. Maybe two. You owe me nothing, I answered. You owe your people everything. I am sorry, she said anyway, for accepting a role I did not understand, for confusing the feeling of being chosen with being prepared. Apology accepted, I said. Shown work required. Her mouth tilted. I thought you might say that. She left me a copy of a schedule she had drafted. Ride-alongs, night shift rotations, training modules with actual tests instead of vibes. At the bottom, a scrawl. If I am not better in 3 months, I will step down. At my insistence, not yours. Accountability, finally, volunteered instead of extracted. That evening, Evan and I sat on the floor with takeout that dripped on the good paper, and we did not care. He raised a chopstick like a wand. To the offer you did not take. To the life I did, I replied. We clinked wooden sticks. The cat from the upstairs balcony performed a slow parade along the railing like judgment wearing whiskers. Harbor City glowed. Somewhere, a crane stopped moving and someone went home on time. That is a miracle. We should celebrate more like that. The next day, Marcus called me into his office with a half smile. Board wants to expand your remit, he said. Not with a new title, but with something better. Scope and backup.
Build the ethics framework into a service we can license to partners who care about dignity as a competitive advantage. Dignity, a competitive advantage, I repeated, savoring the phrase. Let us prove it. We built a small team with sharp minds and soft egos. Lila joined to track the money without blurring the people. A former stevedore named Harlan came aboard to speak for the doc when the conference room got too proud. We chose a name that would never make a billboard. Floorworks. Our mandate was simple. Raise floors. Do not fuss with ceilings. By week's end, 2 more companies reached out. Not for rescue, but for redesign. We accepted one and declined the other, not because their money was wrong, but because their posture was. I have learned to recognize the smell of a room that will ask you to lie. You cannot fix an organization that has not yet decided to tell itself the truth. At home that night, Evan found me standing barefoot in the kitchen, reading an email from a dispatcher I will never meet. Thank you for making telling the truth a promotion instead of a problem. I placed my phone on the counter like it might shatter and breathed. Sometimes the win is not loud enough to trend. Sometimes it is a single person getting to keep their job and their spine at the same time. That is the revolution. The harbor lights do not go out often. When they do, it is not messy. It is mythic. A substation tripped, a rolling blackout spreading like spilled ink across the piers. Screens blinked dead. Radios crackled. Things that never sleep forgot how to be awake. My phone rang before the power finished falling. We lost the grid, Harlan said, voice steady. Backup holds, but we are blind in pockets. Call the manual tree, I said, already pulling on boots. We do this analog. The war room at Meridian hummed on generator glow. We pulled out paper maps, real ones, grease pencil arrows where trucks should be. Pin flags for cranes. We rotated runners with printed updates because email was a joke. I called Dana at Whitman and Rayner. She picked up on the first ring. We are up, she said. Manual as the 1990s. Better than the 1990s, I said. We have a culture that can handle it. Amaya at Harbor Collective joined the line. Tell me true, do I panic? You pack patience, I said. We will land you by morning. Our ethics framework became an instrument panel you can read in the dark. We invoked the rule that says urgent beats dramatic.
We triaged by risk to humans first, then to cargo, then to headlines. Harlan sent a text every quarter hour with 3 bullets: what moved, what stalled, what he personally did. At 2 a.m, Sloan texted a photo from a terminal: hair under a hard hat, boots muddy. On site, running the hand lists, will not leave until dawn. I showed the message to Rebecca.
She nodded, then got back on the phone with a rail partner who hates being awake at 2 and loves being chosen for competence. By 3, we had a rhythm. By 4, the grid began to remember itself. By 5, we were closing loops and returning people to warm coffee. At 6, the sun peeled the harbor out of its night shape. The cranes looked like giant bones against a pale sky, prehistoric and stubborn. We had moved more than we should have been able to move without blinking. At 7, we gathered for the hot wash: coffee, bagels, the smell of worn adrenaline. We went around the table. What worked? What flashed red? What we baked into muscle next time? No one took a victory lap. Everyone took a breath. Marcus walked in, hair refusing to obey. He eyed the paper maps, the grease pencil streaks, the piles of crossed-out lists. "You threw a blackout party without me," he said. "You were busy keeping the rest of the city lit," I replied. He smiled, then grew serious. "We will send a note to every client," he said. "Not just the ones who asked for it. What we did, what we learned, what we will invest in so you do not have to worry when a substation decides it is done." We wrote the note together. It contained no heroics and exactly 1 sentence of pride. Our people chose the ethical order of triage at every turn. We hit send and braced for the echo. It arrived as gratitude, sober and specific. Around noon, a message from Gerald. "Thank you. We would have fallen without the drills you forced on us. Dana wants you to speak to our night shift next week about building calm into chaos." I wrote back, "Ask Dana to speak. I will attend and underline." The next day, the trade journal that loves fireworks published a breathless piece about the port miracle. I ignored it and instead read a short post from a longshoreman in a private forum. Felt like someone remembered we are not disposable. Management brought donuts and kept their mouths shut until we asked for them. Weird. Good weird. That one I saved. That weekend, Evan drove us to the state park that pretends Harbor City does not exist. We walked through pines and said almost nothing. At a quiet stretch, he stopped and touched my shoulder. "You know," he said, "you always wanted vindication. What you got is better." What did I get? "A platform," he said, "and the decency not to use it as a podium." I leaned into him the way a person leans into a weather pattern that finally makes sense. The wind moved the tops of the trees. The trunks held. We ate sandwiches that tasted like every good childhood at once, and decided that for dinner we wanted something with too much garlic and exactly enough bread. On Monday, I recorded the follow-up episode I had promised. No gloating, no names, just steps. What to do when the lights go out and the old habits scream. How to make the apology that keeps a client from calling a competitor before breakfast. Why dignity scales faster than drama when you invest it on purpose. I ended with a paragraph I had written at 3 a.m, coffee pot muttering like a friend who cannot sleep either. If you are the person who gets called when the building leaks, they will call you names that sound like comfort and feel like containment. Dependable, solid, predictable. Keep the best parts. Refuse the leash. In the right rooms, reliability is not a leash. It is a key. We shipped the episode. The inbox filled. Somewhere in that stack of messages was a note from a woman I will never meet, telling me she printed her letter on heavy paper and slept for the first time in months. I closed my eyes and pictured the envelope. The feel of it is always the same: weight and release, fear and spine. I do not believe in revenge. I believe in building floors thick enough to hold the weight of what you are about to become. The harbor is loud, but the lessons are quiet. You do not have to win every room. You have to find the rooms where winning does not require a disguise. I did not get my promotion from a toast. I got my life back from a letter. Between those two, there were drills and maps and nights when the city forgot how to light itself, and still we moved the freight. Gerald is learning to be the kind of man who builds floors instead of pedestals. Sloane is learning to be the kind of leader who can look a night foreman in the eye without flinching. Dana is leading like she has always worked, head down, eyes open, names remembered. Meridian is exactly what I wanted from a company when I was young and excellent and invisible. A place where results are not confused with performances, where honesty is the first tool you reach for. At home, Evan toasts the miracle of ordinary evenings. We walk by the water and talk about everything that has nothing to do with logistics, until my shoulders remember they are not made of rope. I keep my grandmother's locket by my desk. I still tape sentences above my screen. The newest one reads, "No is a complete sentence. Yes is a contract you sign with your future." If you are listening to this wondering if your letter is a fantasy or a fuse, here is my answer, steady and simple. You already know. Print the paper when you are ready. In the meantime, keep receipts on yourself. Write down the brilliance you make look easy. Practice the apology that you will one day ask someone else to give you. And when the right door opens, walk in like you built it. Because you did. Now, breathe. We are not done. We are just different. That is the win. If this story made you feel seen, press like right now so more people find it. Tell me your favorite moment. Was it the letter, the award speech, the blackout, or the offer I did not take? Drop your answer in the comments.